Thank you so much for being here. Today, we have Building a Thriving Workforce, Fostering Belonging Through Employee Engagement as this session. And without further ado, I will introduce Nadia Muijrers. I think I pronounced that correctly, is the head of Academy and Learning Design at ATÖLYE Middle East, specializing in transformative, people-centered learning experiences. With a background in organizational culture, leadership, and social innovation, she blends business, social sciences, and emotional intelligence to help leaders and teams drive impactful change. Next up, we have Ange Dunselman-Kunzmann, who is a strategic communications leader with over 25 years of experience in purpose-driven storytelling, employee engagement, and ESG communications. Formerly the global head of employee communications at Philips, now she advises organizations on fostering trust, collaboration, and meaningful impact. Next up, we have Kerem Alper, who is the co-founder and CEO of NEO, an AI native talent platform reimagining how organizations collaborate with networks. With a background in systems thinking, entrepreneurship, and design, he also serves as chair of ATÖLYE and advises impact-driven organizations whilst championing decentralized innovation. Finally, we have Thomas Swaak, is an executive transformation manager specializing in enterprise-wide change, complex IT programs, and organizational development. Currently a Facilitation and Change Management Master at ASML, he also lectures at Nyen Road and Leiden University, bringing expertise in lean, agile, and large-scale transformation projects.
Thank you, and well done on all those Dutch pronunciations. They're tough. Thanks, Melissa and Milan, for getting us started. Thomas, Angie, Kerem, it's great to have you with us today. And everyone who is still on this call, survivors, thank you so much for joining us. To our speakers today, each of you brings such a unique experience and perspective to this topic around belonging and engagement. So I'm really excited for this conversation. To get us started, could you briefly introduce yourselves and share a moment in your career when you truly felt a deep sense of belonging in the workplace and what made that experience stand out for you? Jump in.
I'll start. So hi, Ange Dunselman. And as introduced, so I'm a strategic communications consultant, but I also had, before going independent, 24 years, so a very long career at Philips, many different communications, leadership roles. And the most recent, the last one, was leading the global employee communications. That was a time of CEO changeover in the middle of a large recall crisis in healthcare, one of the biggest healthcare recalls. A new strategy, which comes with a new CEO, and basically the beginnings of what there's still the tail of the largest reorganization in the company in 30 years. At the time, it was 80,000 employees. A lot there about how to bring and keep communities together through change. So on the question of when I felt really part of a community, and I think I saw from the chat from one of the last session a little bit the mention of COVID. So I'm going to actually bring that up because when we went into COVID and the team I was leading at the time, like everyone, we went home, we went into lockdown, and then how to continue a community. And we were already a very close team. And we did that through really on the front end, creating online games and online coffee moments. And the most fun was we passed the buck and everyone created a video of a day in their lives. So we started to open up and show more about who we were personally, what we did at home, what our workplace looked like, and breaking through the sort of traditional work relationship barriers.
Wow. Nice, Angie.
Thanks, Thomas.
Good to see you again.
You too.
As you folks might gather, I hope it's okay if I go next. Angie and I have a history. We both worked at Philips. We have that in common. I was counting it up. I've been working for the past 40 years, mostly in change management roles, moving from education to high tech, and have been in that for the past 30 years. Currently focusing on leadership development and team coaching within ASML, mentoring and coaching as well. It's also, I think, related to the phase of life that I'm in, because I have about 4 more years to go. And it's logical to wind up in a position like that. I'd be tempted to ramble on, but I'm not going to. we'll get to enough in our conversation. One of the times that I felt I belonged most was also one of the most challenging times I've ever been through in my life. I was program manager of a program in Uzbekistan and also in Kyrgyzstan to improve the educational system at a country level. And we were a team of 120 approximately, run by a small inner team, Uzbeks, Russians, and a couple of nationalities in the core team as well. And we were spread over a country with 22 million people, half of whom were under 18. You can imagine how many schools, how many universities. So this was scattered like you wouldn't believe. And I think what kept us together, what held us together, not only in the core team, but also in some of the small villages that we visited and some of the universities in the outback that had no running water or electricity, was the sheer impossibility of the task and the attitude of, yeah, but we'll make this work. This time we will. And it was not only a sense of common purpose, but I think everyone connected on a very personal level also within that group. And I think that held the sense of belonging. We were so different when you consider it. It's a miracle that we were actually able to get things done. But I think also that difference played into the feeling of, yeah, these are the ingredients. This is how it can work. Many friendships were formed from that and many different communities. Let me stop there because otherwise I'll fill the hour with my recollections. And that was not the intention of this meeting.
All right, I'll go next. Hi again, everyone. Very nice to meet you, Thomas, and hi again, Angie. Kerem, co-founder of ATÖLYE. Engin and I have been on the trenches for the last over a decade now, thinking about kind of community systems and how we can bring together the right individuals to tackle large-scale challenges that the world is facing. As part of ATÖLYE, in the last few years, we've been working on building our own technology to enable us to think about kind of communities in a more structured way, using technology like AI to help us curate and manage communities more effectively. And we spun out that as a venture about 2 years ago. And with that, I'm now spending a lot of time on building Neol and beyond ATÖLYE, enabling other organizations to similarly think about their communities, their networks in a new lens. For me, as part of my journey with ATÖLYE, there are countless moments where I felt this incredible sense of belonging. And it all really comes down to the people that we were surrounded by, both our team as well as our community members. One moment that, as I was reflecting now, that stands out is every year we had, back in the day, we were doing one major offsite, and then now we've increased it to 4 since COVID. Obviously, the need to get together is now more pressing than perhaps before. But again, interesting about ATÖLYE is that in every retreat, we try to completely reimagine the organization. And we go really deep into it. But what that really brings out, not in every offsite we leave with obviously huge hopes about how ATÖLYE is going to completely become a new animal. And then the next day we realize it's not that easy to reimagine ourselves, but also to rebuild ourselves. But in one of the retreats, we were separated into 4 groups to think about what ATÖLYE is as an element in nature. And I remember 4 groups thought about ATÖLYE in their own ways. One group thought about it as a mountain. The other group thought about it as a base camp itself, where you go from that base camp to climb a mountain, but you don't really know where to go. You just follow what's ahead of you. Another team thought about it as a river that kind of helps the community flow through in a direction that feels right. And thinking about all these different elements in nature, it all came down to the same core principle, which is we are a team and we are surrounded by a community and we are fed challenges. Regardless of the way we go about solving them, what really unites us is this common passion and common purpose. So this is just one of the moments where I really felt a deep sense of belonging to the people that we were collaborating with.
Nice.
Thomas, you used the words ingredients, and some of the things that I've heard, both from the three of you as well as in the chat earlier, like retreats and the socials, the in-person gatherings and the dynamics in COVID. What I heard was that underlying personal or human connection is really one of those key ingredients, of course. And then perhaps also going through something challenging or doing deep work, doing that together. That's another one that I heard. In terms of the conversation more broadly around belonging, it has evolved a lot and continues to do, especially with the rise of non-traditional work structures. Kerem, you spoke to your work at NEOL now as a decentralized and more network-based model. How have you seen the definition of belonging shift over the years, either in the organizations or communities that you've worked with?
That was me, right?
Anyone, open.
Anyone?
Yeah,
okay. Maybe a few ideas. If I think back also to the example that I gave, we did have one site where we gathered. So it was place bound, it was organization bound, the sense of belonging, and very much, if I remember working in traditional companies, it's also centrally driven, the sense of belonging. And the shift that I've seen is that belonging is no longer place bound. Particularly in COVID, there was a digital place, but I've seen a shift from it being place bound to even more. I wouldn't say that that wasn't there in the first place, but even more bound to personal connections that people make. So personal relationships and actually investing in having personal relationships, that would be one. And two, that also the idea of a place and a team has become fluid. If I were to add up the teams that I'm involved in now, I'd need more than both hands. Where's my sense of belonging then? If it used to be team bound, one specific team, now it's more across the purpose and the mission that you share, but also the click and the link that you share. So just to kick it off, a few aspects that I have seen change in terms of how do you define belonging. Maybe last one is that culture used to be something that was defined at the top, and I know I'm not doing it justice, and rolled down to the bottom. And now the idea of having a culture which allows you to belong is more in enabling different groups to come up with it themselves. So that would be a couple of shots that I would give it in terms of how it has changed.
I can share a few add-ons. I think Thomas already summarized a lot of things I wanted to touch eloquently. The idea of, it's interesting. So again, when we first started ATÖLYE, one of the things, and Engin being an architect, one of the things we paid a lot of attention to was the space component. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, we had spaces, the body language of an organization was written on our wall or on the stairs coming in. And so space, the place really mattered a lot in building the community and giving people a sense of belonging. And today, I would say that's shifted from kind of place to purpose. Now, with really people coming together around challenges that they're solving, I think, and place still is a very important activator of enabling people to connect and share, and as a result, feel a sense of belonging to each other. But my observation is this sense of alignment with purpose plays a very important role in both ATÖLYE, both from the team perspective as well as our community, and equally so at NEOL, for instance, we don't have an office. We are fully decentralized. We actually crash at ATÖLYE offices or hub around. But what we come around is a shared purpose that we wanna bring to life. So that's one. The other is as fluidity is increasing, I think in organization, silos are at least in some organizations that we're familiar with, silos are getting broken, and or individuals who normally wouldn't be interacting are now collaborating on solving some meaningful challenge the organization is facing. Obviously, as ATÖLYE, we've always built teams around challenges, so that's natural to us, building teams around projects or around engagement. But in many companies, that's not the case. You used to work in your own silos. But as individuals started to collaborate with others, I think this mode of collaboration became a very important, again, enabler of enabling people to feel a sense of belonging. Because when you are collaborating with people who are outside of your own team, now opportunities emerge for you to learn, to really be surprised, to really get to know the other side in a deeper way. They might have a completely different backgrounds to you. And I think as in social circles, I do think we are attracted to those who can help us grow. And I think that the new ways of collaboration that happen both within organizations as well as within communities is enabling us to feel a deeper sense of belonging to the whole. So those would be my ads.
Maybe I can just jump in there because I think the two words that came up, or at least stuck with me, because I think that they're core to a great organization and why people stay in organizations. And it's about purpose and the people. And I think that's really what attracts people, what makes people stick. And then also Thomas's point on culture. I think culture, we could talk about that all day, all week. But I think what is interesting is indeed it is often defined from the top, but it lives everywhere. But I think that the thing that is really critical is making sure that how it's defined and how it's being led, that there's alignment there. Because if an organization is defining, these are our three words, just this is our culture, but what they're seeing from their leadership is something very different, and there's misalignment, the culture will be led by what the leaders are doing, and that often will trickle into what people are actually experiencing. That's the culture.
The conversation wouldn't be complete without also talking about the challenges. So, Angie, you spoke to this earlier. Change, especially if there's a lot of changes going on at the same time, can be very destabilizing for employees. What are some common challenges, and how have you successfully guided teams through that change? Open to anybody, not just Angie.
Go for it, Angie.
Okay. I'll just pick up on just a few points, at least on some of the work that we did at Philips, because that was a major change. And the challenges are, it is for a lot of people when there's big change happening. Again, we had CEO changeover. We had an enormous restructuring happening, including a lot of almost 10% of the workforce reduction. So how do you do that in a way that still keeps people engaged, that still is aligned with your company values, and even the people who you'll have to say goodbye to, that you do it in a way that is caring, and because that's part of your company values. And I would say it is one, again, I'm communications. It's over communicating. We communicated and communicated. We had global town halls every 2 weeks. We were empowering the layers of leadership under at all levels to be able to communicate, and made sure that we knew that they were expected to do so, and to do it in a very honest and authentic way. And I think it's always very important to remember when we talk about communities, it's always about people, and people in their holistic sense. So it's not just that there's like a one compartmentalized compartment of someone's brain saying, now I'm an employee. That person is experiencing something in a very holistic way. So I think even amongst the challenges, it's easy sometimes to feel, I think also from whether it's at executive board level, we can't say this, we can't say that, so let's not say anything. Never shut it down, because people are just waiting to hear something. So even within the challenges, and sometimes just saying it's so challenging, we don't know what to say, at least that's authentic and real.
I can bridge immediately on that one, Angie, because some memories come flooding back in terms of pretty big outsourcing programs that I've been involved in. And there are two things I wanted to share in that regard. One very simple one that I over-communicate, to use your words, and that is when people hear of a transformation, something new, they have to do four things. They have to, first of all, they have to understand what's going on. They have to form an understanding. Then they have to form a perspective. What do I think of this? What's my opinion? Then they need time to align together. What do we think about this? And only then are they ready to start talking about readiness to act. So what does it mean, and what are we going to do? And what I've seen too many times is that those steps are skipped. And we tell a story, we ask, okay, does everybody get it? We wait 1.7 seconds, and then we say, okay, let's go. And we assume that people have gone through these four steps. And I think it's not just vital in communication. I think that's also vital in forming a community, because you have to understand what it's about. You have to make up your own mind. You have to align with others and then act to make it happen. So that was one thing that came to mind in a very practical sense. And the other thing that you sparked in the example that you gave, when we did outsourcings, I think without knowing it at the time, so let me be honest, we actually anticipated the kinds of communities that would form, because we'd have a community of people who would stay. And what would that mean for them? We'd have a community of folks who would transfer. What would that mean for them, right? What does their world, their ecosystem look like? We'd have a community of people who would enable the transfer and then simply lose their jobs. So what would they need, and how would we communicate with them? And there would be a community of people who refused to transfer. And then what would happen with them? And the example that I want to give is a community that I hadn't thought of at all, that manifested as we went into these processes. And we had a community of folks who were between the ages of 58 and 64. And they did not move a millimeter in the entire proceedings. And we made, or I made, I have to be honest, the classic mistake of working harder and harder to solve what I thought might be the problem, right? And the only thing that actually saved my skin in this one was that it didn't work for 1.5 years, because we informed people 1.5 years up front what would be happening, until it finally came to me that I should actually ask them what they want as a community. Right. And so I sat down with them and they said, we want two things. We want to go and talk to our own age group at the new company, and we don't want you to be there. Okay. That was one. And they said, two, we want to know what's happening to our friggin' pension. We're not getting any traction with that particular department. Fixed it in 2 days flat and walked around for a couple of weeks thinking to myself, why have you forgotten the basics? Start on the other side.
Listen.
Yeah. So that was what I wanted to share.
Nice.
Thank you for that, Thomas. When Angie shared her initial answer, particularly about the town halls and whatnot, the first thing that came to mind was, are those conversations top-down or multi-directional? So thanks for building that bridge, Thomas. So my next question was around the role of leadership. I can somewhat infer it from what's already been shared, but I'll ask it anyway. What role does leadership play in sustaining a culture of belonging over time? Leadership at various levels.
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit. I feel very passionate about this because having seen, and I think maybe Thomas, you might have been there at the time at Philips. I'm not sure, but having experienced a couple of CEO changeovers, I'm talking about the highest level of leadership, but it's just an example because I think it goes at all levels. A new leader steps in and the culture can shift within, even in a very large multinational, within a month. The trickle down and the trickle through. And then I think at every team level, it's the same thing. And let me also just want to say, I think leadership is very broad. So I'm not talking about a manager, I'm talking about a leader. And that can also be a different thing. It can be the same thing, but some managers forget to lead. I think the importance is, and this is building a little bit what Thomas was saying, is also listening. So a leader should also be listening. Again, I'm trying to select examples. I don't take too much time on it, but I give you an example. Some of the CEO changeover that I was part of at Philips a couple of years ago, I started to realize that the employee base, so basically the group that this person is leading, what they thought it was, the CEO thought it was, and what it actually was very different. So I started to actually collect the data, the demographics, and start to show this is who your employee base is. It's not people like me who had been there 20 years, who understood the strategy, it was people who had been there less than 2 years, the majority. They were younger than I was. There was a very different base. And so if you don't understand who you're talking to, if you're talking about a big organization, you're not going to get the messages across. You're not going to connect. If you're talking about a smaller group, the importance of really seeing the people around you is critical. And that's one of the things I have to say. I love leading teams. And that is because I love people. I love their quirks. Even in professional environments, I will look for their quirks. I'll look for their individualism. And what I have gotten back from people in teams I've led is them saying, because I know you see us and you accept my quirks, then you accept everyone's quirks, and we accept each other's quirks. And then you really start to have this diversity in a very beautiful way. And I think that leadership should be able to do that. And that's how you develop community. It's not just, community isn't a thing, it's a collection of individuals with all their quirks.
I like that.
I very much
We're-
echo
yeah.
everything Angie said. I think for leaders to do the deep inner work and really coming out on the other side with what is it that they feel a sense of belonging to, and also similarly, what is it that they don't feel a sense of belonging to within the organization is absolutely critical. The authenticity of a leader in really showing up in a way that signals that they have done the deep work personally, I think is one of the most critical and fundamental things. And luckily, I think we are more and more live in a world where leaders are paying attention to self work as much as professional work or work on delivering results, basically.
Yeah, I very much recognize and empathize that. I have two concrete examples of enabling leadership, which comes to my mind in terms of belonging and forming communities. So let me be brief. The CEO who just left, Peter Wenning at ASML, had a habit of coming down to breakfast at 7:30 in the morning, having a croissant and a cup of coffee. And basically anybody could come and walk up to him and talk to him about whatever they wanted. Now, that's access to a CEO that I've never seen at that level, except for at ASML. And one day I decided to make use of it. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm doing a master class in conflict resolution. What do you think of that?" And I know that was a topic that was quite current also among leadership. And his response was, "When are you doing this?" I said, "Friday." He said, "At what time?" "Between 9 and 11. He said, "I think I can come the first half hour. So shall I come and talk to your folks?" And he showed up. Now, that's the strongest example of bottom-up leadership enablement of helping to form a community around the topic of how we deal with conflicts and how we deal with one another that I've ever seen. It's quite personal. And the other example is, this is about 9 months ago, two younger colleagues, I'm old, so I get to say that, came and found me. And they said, "Listen, we have this idea to create a half day around the theme of inclusion. We want people from inside ASML and we want people from outside ASML. What do you think?" That was the pitch. And I thought it was so fantastic. I offered to help in the background with some ideas. I plugged them into my network, which is basically at the top of the organization. And 6 months later, 600 people showed up, half from ASML, half from the outside. And we had our day on inclusion. And why share this example with you? I think that's also a fundamental shift. It's not, leadership doesn't just, it's what Angie said. It's about listening and then not defining, but enabling and empowering people to set this up for themselves. And it's unbelievable what becomes possible then. So I just wanted to pitch that rather strongly, I believe, but okay. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We've got about 10 minutes or so left, and we're starting to see some questions in the chat. I
Yeah.
see one by Moyez. So we maybe start with that. And if anyone else has any questions as well, feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand and I'll call you out. Moyez, are you there? Would you like to voice it out?
Yes. Hi, everyone. The question that comes to me in mind, having worked in the space of organizational culture, is how does culture and community belonging impact individual autonomy? In other ways, sometimes I see it resulting in impacting individuals in ways that result in a kind of a false sense of belonging. What are your thoughts on that?
Could you describe what you mean by a false sense of belonging?
They feel that they're part of the culture, but it goes against some of their values.
Uh-huh.
They feel that they have to belong in certain ways, even though they may not see it as being right or aligning with the community or the organizational values.
If I may, Moise, from I recognize what you're saying, that people feel they can't opt out of the
Yes.
ways that people have decided to be together and to treat one another. And what I've also seen in that regard is a counter movement to go beneath what we always say is go beneath the waterline. The behavior that we observe, and then there's how people feel about this, and going into this in combination with the whole drive towards diversity and psychological safety creates more moments to break through stuff like this. But I'm not going to say that it's not there. It is, but I do see a counter movement in terms of making that transparent and really learning, okay, so what is really driving you and what's working for you and what isn't. And I think there's more openness about that in at least if I look back at my experience. That would be my first response to you. And I'm thankful that you raised it.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think I'm seeing that as well. I think that, again, that may be different in across the globe. In regions, I'm based in Bahrain here, so I can speak about this region in general. There is a sense of collectiveness rather than individualism. And as good as that is in building communities, it sometimes takes away that autonomy or the individual being able to be themselves and really feel that they belong, where they actually have a voice, where they actually can contribute to that community. So I think that's something that perhaps maybe needs to be addressed over time.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah. And I think having different cultures together helps. But if it's very common, then it's, yeah, a few people have to stand up to begin to address that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna add, indeed, I think that it is where there can be some role modeling that, yes, you can be different, you can be yourself and still be part of this community. And then you start to see that unlocks that many more people will ideally do the same. However, I think if there is a community which has some kind of basic values which seriously conflict with an individual's values, and I'm talking about core values, then it is probably near impossible to really feel that you can be authentic in the community.
Thank you.
We have one last. So Ahmed is with his kids, so he cannot voice it, so I will voice it for him. It seems to me the whole tension of belonging within working spaces or sometimes social spaces is the strict hierarchical structure our modern world has gotten used to. Agency in the dream of a community is placed on leadership, especially the starting leaders, and community members, staff follow on that dream without really integrating their own dreams into the organization. How do you feel about cultivating community within our current societal systems? Because for me, it seems our systems are not conducive to community building.
I'll give a very brief answer to that one because it immediately crops up in my mind. There is such a thing as leading from behind, and there is such a thing as servant leadership. And I think the hierarchical aspect depends very much on where a leader begins. And there's also, third thing, there's also self-leadership. Leadership doesn't only have to do with the hierarchical position that somebody has. It's also me in charge of myself. And those three combined, I think, is the starting point to create communities which aren't caught within a hierarchical structure, but speak to human need, human endeavor. And that's it. Those are my first couple of thoughts. Good question.
I was just going to say, so I think as leaders or starters of communities, what are we holding on to as our systems evolve, and what are we ready to let go of? We need to be very, I think, thoughtful about this. I think we sometimes stick to things that don't necessarily, they might be relevant, they might be against where the organization is trying to move. They might be completely on deck to what the team or the community is asking for. So I think as leaders, because the question was related to how do I still feel a sense of belonging to a community when I feel like the leader is simply moving in another direction. And even though I'm asked to dream, I'm dreaming for no good reason because nothing is changing, which is like the very typical challenge with both organizations, more classic organizations, more legacy system organizations, as well as more new generation organizations. So for me, one of the first principles literally going in is to be outlined. What are we ready to challenge, to redream, to redefine, to work on together, and not to fake like we're working on it, but really work on it together. And what are the things we're going to stick to? And what are the things that I'm not willing to discuss? I think when we are in that middle stage where we are faking discussion, but it's not really leading anywhere because we've already made up our minds and we're already ready not to change. I think that's when really people start getting demotivated, they check out and they lose their sense of belonging for a very good reason. So anyways, that was a big and important learning for us as we were evolving to the end and with our community.
Mm.
We've had a few book recommendations in the chat, which is great. Some great contributions. I have one last question for the day. So I'll post it in the chat as well so that anyone who feels inspired can answer. But if organizations could make one bold move tomorrow, what would you advise?
One bold move I can think of is merging the functions of kind of external ecosystem management and internal team and talent related functions. So not thinking about the organization as we have internal things to worry about and then we have external things to worry about and they're connected, but rather they are as one because we are one large ecosystem and every player in that ecosystem has a very important role in enabling the organization to move forward.
I think I can build on that, Kerem. And I think we're very much in the similar direction. I would say a bold move would be to strategically and intentionally build communities that cross the organization's boundary into its ecosystem. And it doesn't matter to me what it is. I can give you an example. There's this incredibly inspirational guy in Rotterdam who thinks that we can build cities on water. And he's built a little prototype that you can go visit. And they've got cows on there. It's a completely self-sustaining, and then forming a community with this guy and his ecosystem and our folks who are thinking about being environmentally responsible, this kind of a thing, and not just intentionally, but simply as part of our culture. So shifting the culture beyond those boundaries to build communities like that would be a bold move.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go a little bit different direction.
Cool.
I like those. But I think one of the things that we haven't talked about, at least at our session, is the state of the world as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people I know, when this was being shown, advertised on LinkedIn, came to me and said, oh my gosh, this is great, because people are looking for community, because people are anxious. There's a lot of uncertainty economically, politically, geopolitically. The Edelman Trust Barometer, which came out, I think, every year, just a couple of weeks ago, and it really shows really increasing skepticism about institutions and governments. And even there, and I tried to look through because I'm an optimist, right? So I'm always looking for something good. And it said that people still have trust in their employers. So I don't want to only say as only employers as an institution, but still, let's talk about that as any kind of organization that people are connected to. And they're looking for stability, leadership. And I would say they're looking for leadership to be transparent and share their values. And I think if nothing else, this is the time when the bold move is for leaders to take a stand.
Mm. Yeah.
Thanks for weaving that in, Angie. I think some of the answers in the chat echo your sentiment, from speaking up about the most important world problems, restorative justice practices, quite a few contributions in the chat as well. I think that takes us to the end of the day. Thank you so much for joining this conversation, both Angie, Thomas, and Kerem, and everyone who's still here with us. Melissa, I'm going to hand it back to you to close for today until tomorrow.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been a very inspiring day. I feel full of hope, inspiration, definitely things we need in this day and age. Thank you so much to all our wonderful speakers once more and our moderators. It has been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Wonderful
you.
job.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.